All right, you are live.
All right, thanks, Kate. We're going
Yep.
to convene today's meeting of the Charter and Code Committee of Dewey Beach. Let's just start with the pledge, if we could. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic
for which it stands, liberty and justice for all.
All right, let's do a quick roll call of the committee. I'm just going to say your name and you can say here. Jimmy O'Connor.
Jimmy O'Connor.
Dave Lyons.
Elaine Bowl.
Elaine Bowl. Okay. And Mally here as well. From the town commissioner, Gary Persinger, and from the town, Dawn. Is it just you, Dawn? We don't have Jim today or Bill?
As far as I know, it's just me.
Okay. We're not unhappy. We're happy to have you.
Thank you.
Fantastic. All right. First order of business. I know we're going back away because we didn't have the meeting in April. Is there anything anybody wants to discuss around the February 28th meeting minutes, or does anyone have a motion to approve those?
You guys, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you,
I
Dave.
second it.
Seconding. All right.
Did you adopt the agenda?
Oh, yes. Sorry. You're right. I'm racing ahead. Before we, can we have a motion to adopt today's agenda?
I'll make a motion to adopt the agenda.
Thank you.
Second it.
Okay. Thanks, Gary. I did skip right past that one. So I think we had two main areas in terms of progress from work that was underway last time. Dave, I know that you have a limited time with us today. So you sent a document out earlier. Do you want to start with that item and we can go from there?
Sure. If everybody has it. So the two topics I have are accessory buildings and structures, and the others related to trees. So I'm going to focus tonight on accessory buildings and structures. What we got from code enforcement was just some requests to clarify the code specifically around impervious materials, what defines what is or what is not impervious materials, or what is considered required to be impervious. So on the Word document I sent, I don't know if everybody has access to it or not. But when we went through it, in the sections at the top, which is kind of the definition section, and the accessory code structure review, there's a section definitions 1-16. So we just thought under accessory structure, we might point to other areas in the town code that references accessory building structure. And then below, I'll detail those, but we thought if you're looking for accessory structures, this is where in the code you should look for it. So 101-29 is related to flood damage reduction. And so there's no real need to change anything there. It does speak to requirements for accessory structures as part of flood damage. That section really didn't need any changes to it. The other section is in the zoning code, which is section 185 of the code. And the only suggestion in meeting with Dawn and Jim was in paragraph F to insert some words around help define what is walkable or how impervious should be applied. So basically we inserted the words or any walkable or non-walkable ground insulated material, insulated material. And I think that covers, because one of the questions was like pools. So pools is not walkable, therefore it's not part of the need for impervious materials.
Hey, can you, so forgive me, I'm looking at your document on my phone.
Mm-hmm.
So, maybe I'm not seeing, I think I'm seeing the language, but not with edits called out. This includes the language you guys have drafted, yeah?
Yeah, so can you see, I can share my screen. Can you see my screen?
I can.
Okay, so this might make it a little easier. This is what I sent out. Let me just go back to the top for a minute. So here's the section at the top related to definitions.
Yep, I got it.
Okay, so here's what I just suggested inserting right here, these two reference points here in accessory structure. And then as you scroll through it, this is just a section of definitions. And then if you come down to accessory structures, this is the section in flood damage reduction. So there's no changes here. I just put it in so everybody could see it. And then really this is the section here, 185, section 185. There's a piece here on prior construction of accessory buildings. And down here in section F was the added change to deal with impervious surfaces. And I think, Dawn, you have anything you want to add to that?
When it comes to the area, yes, a pool is considered a structure. However, sometimes what I find are folks that will say, well, what about the 3-foot walkway that I've got to have and it's required around a pool? Can it be pervious? I mean, can it be impervious? And of course, I come back and say, no, it cannot. Because of the fact that what we're having difficulty here in Dewey is the groundwater and that sort of flooding, so forth, that we want water to go down into the ground as opposed to sheet off into either the pool, into the neighbor's yard, or into the house in and of itself. So I've always had it so that any walkable surface, as stated here, needs to be impervious or have water to be able to be perked through. And it is really the installation of much of those materials and the layers. It's almost like lasagna that helps that water to go down into the ground as opposed to sheet off and go heaven knows where. So.
Okay, got it. That helps. So in the addition of this language that you've got highlighted here, but or any walkable or non-walkable ground installed material, that is that designed to make it clearer for homeowners on what they're able to do? What are we trying to do there?
Well, it was kind of the, I'll take a shot and Dawn help me out here, but the idea was to make it, since it wasn't clear, anything that's walkable or non-walkable, right? Sidewalks or any walkable or non-walkable ground installed material.
Yes, anything that you walk upon would be something that could have water from rainwater and so forth, hit it and then sheet off and cause greater damage. So walkable does seem to be quite all-encompassing because it could be a sidewalk, a patio, it could be a driveway. Those are the main things that we get requests for when it comes to permit applications.
And what's a last question for me, I promise. What's a non-walkable ground installed material?
Can I just say a roof?
Oh, hi, Marcia.
Hi, a roof.
What is a roof ground installed?
Well, the roof is creating a surface that's non-walkable that doesn't allow water to penetrate.
That's true.
Okay.
I just am saying, let's think broader.
Okay, so does your example of a roof, which makes sense to me, fit into the language that was inserted here? Or it's non-walkable, but I don't know what ground. I don't want to keep going over the same language, but Thank you for your roof example. I'm stuck on the phrase non-walkable ground installed materials.
So,
Yeah.
just another comment, when I read this, I think one of the issues with how it's worded is no portion of any building lot area, meaning highlighting any building lot area developed with a residential or mixed use in any district shall be covered or paved with impervious materials. So it's not just a roof. It's really the first sentence in this that I see that needs to be refined a little bit, because either we have to say and sift through, not including surfaces such as a roof. The first one that comes to my mind is that first sentence includes the roof of your house.
Yeah. Okay. Don, do you have a view on that?
Well, certainly when it comes to a roof, we're also looking into building code. Certainly we cannot have any structure that's a livable structure to have the roof allow water to come in. And I know Marcia and I, we had this discussion. So this particular portion of the code really needs to be pinpointed as to what would be affected when it comes to something that's either pervious or impervious. I don't know as if a lot of folks would think of their roof as needing to be pervious, but maybe some folks would. I don't know. I can't see it, but that's in reality, most of the time when it talks about a building lot and it's giving these particular examples, driveways, parking spaces, sidewalks, those are usually ground-based as opposed to a roof that would be up in the air and for the structure itself of a home or a dwelling.
Okay, so Don, do you have a sense of that? Just one more time on that phrase, non-walkable ground installed material. What's an example of that if it's not a roof?
I don't know as if something is non-walkable on the ground, because at that rate, if you have but that's not non-walkable. I don't know. I think I've got to think about that a while.
Okay.
So Dan, I kind of get,
if I just think about something like that, and I'm going to play devil's advocate, and I want to create a Zen garden or something that is not an area planned to be walked on, but I want to create a solid surface and have my tiered little Zen ornamental thing. So I'm just trying to be crazy in terms of our clarity on this section. But if I tell you that's not walkable in my yard, because it is not created to be a walkable surface, and I could say that my 3 foot, the left side of my 3 foot is not intended to be walkable because I have a fountain there. I just think, especially around pools and surfaces within a property, we need to really try to, like on steroids, clarify this. And I think the first thing that comes to my mind is one, for the first sentence, is no portion of any building lot area developed with a residential use or mixed, with exception to the primary housing structure or primary commercial structure, would somehow exempt the roof. But then, we have to be careful. What else does that exempt? Because there's always an unintended consequence.
Yeah.
And the reality is the installation of these materials is 100% reflective on, it's not the material, it's the installation. I
Mhm.
could pour 24 by 24 concrete blocks, but it's how they're installed. And honestly, there are different, because Dawn and I did have this discussion in length. There are different, there's not really a product that is manufactured that is pervious versus an impervious product, except for certain types of concrete for highways. And so it's really, you really can pick any paver, any surface, any brick, any, whatever you're putting down. And it really goes down to the method of installation and how big of a surface are we going to allow? Are you going to allow someone to install 48 by 48 concrete blocks with 1/8 of an inch in between and the layers? I don't think this is a simple section because number one, so many people are building patios and building out their backyards and they don't want lawns and they don't want maintenance and they're building pools. And it's
Oh, okay,
complicated.
that gives us, I think, a couple of things to think about. So thank you. Dave, before I ask a question, I think you were about to say something.
Yeah, I think, Dan, the piece that you're pointing to, which I think makes sense, is this non-walkable, because it kind of confuses. Something's either walkable or not walkable.
Right.
And so I wonder if we shouldn't drop out that non-walkable,
Yeah.
right? And
No,
it just
I-
says any walkable ground installation material.
Yeah, I'm interested what other people, that makes sense to me only because that phrase, I think it's probably clear to all of you. That I didn't.
The thing we were trying to get to was a swimming pool is not walkable. You can't walk on a pool. So therefore that's what it was trying to get to.
Okay. Okay. All right, good. And hey, Gary, as just a brief aside, I think I'm going to ask a question that I heard Elaine ask about on a different topic a couple of meetings ago. The order of things here, once this group starts kicking around language and making edits, is the order of things that we then run this by Fred, or we run it by some lawyer before we get to Fred, and then after that we get to a recommendation to the commissioners, or how do you have any guidance for me on how the order of things should go?
Yeah, it doesn't have to go to Fred. What has to happen, I think, this would be a change to the zoning code. So at some point it has to go through planning and zoning.
Okay. Yeah.
So I would say this would go as a recommendation to the commissioners with the additional, I guess, recommendation that this be reviewed by planning and zoning or considered by planning and zoning.
Okay.
You know, because this has to go through the same process that any change to the zoning code has to go through.
Right.
And so in saying that, you know, when you refer to the commissioners, Fred gets to look at it at that point. Once it goes to planning and zoning, again, you know, Fred or some other legal counsel is involved as well. So there's ample opportunity to get legal input. Now, if there's something that you're unsure about in terms of the legal status of some piece of the code, then it certainly makes sense to go directly to Fred and ask for some legal input on that issue. But otherwise, I think there's enough opportunity for legal counsel built into the process that I don't think you have to have Fred as a separate step.
Okay. Okay. Thanks. That helps. All right. So, Marcia, one of the things that you said, and maybe picking up on something that Dawn alluded to as well, was if there's this concept that it's not just or even primarily about the specific materials, but as much or more about how those materials are installed, then I don't know if there's a spot in here that makes that point. And if not, maybe your suggestion was we should add it to that first sentence. Was that where you were going?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when Dawn and I had this discussion, it was back in 2020, and it was essentially because the code, which we're really trying to define now, didn't have the standards for all surfaces, and there was question about what materials could actually be used, and it wasn't a certain kind of paver. And I'm happy to share this. I think it would be helpful. At that time, I did an interview with David Smith. He was the technical director for Interlocking Concrete Pavement Institute in Chantilly, Virginia.
Mhm.
And so I essentially posed all these questions to him. And I think one of the interesting remarks is I'm reading my notes of the interview.
Hey, Marcia.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I think when you turn your head to look at whatever you're looking at, the microphone loses you.
Oh, okay. So hold on. I'm trying to read my interview on a different computer.
Yeah, sorry. I do the same thing.
Okay, so industry best practices recommends using a permeable jointing stone as previously noted. This makes the removal easier of any sediment that might enter the joints since some gets trapped at the surface. So in terms of paving materials, it's not the way they're manufactured because they are all manufactured with the same concrete process. It's that the ones that allow the penetration have about an 1/8 to 1/4 inch joint around one of the edges. And it doesn't allow you to butt the stones together, essentially. And then like Dawn said, you do the layers that allow the water to go through. I was just thinking if there was something else on this, but I'm happy to share this. It was really helpful. And I think our code misused the two terms, which he thought it did, permeable or pervious. And so we need to actually look at that a little bit. He talks about differentiating a clean or a washed aggregate stone, which is a number 57. They're used in a different type of installation. So it's really not as simple as just having a general, I mean, this process for application is pretty specific in terms of how the layers go down. One thing I might note also though, is when anyone puts crushed stone on a driveway before they put whatever kinds of stone or cinders down they're putting, they have now created immediately a surface that won't allow water to penetrate. So, you know, most of our driveways in Dewey Beach, when you see them just putting down pebbles or whitewashed pebbles, they're putting down a layer of crushed stone, number 57, first, and they are creating essentially a concrete surface. So, you know, you think someone's putting down a pebble driveway, but the application for that almost always requires a crushed stone subsurface. And that's also happening when we're worried so much about individual patios. It is happening in high volume when people are paving their right-of-ways for parking. They're, you know, when they're laying stones down or pretty pebbles or clamshells, they're almost always coming in and the application is a crushed stone subsurface and then the pebbles. So
Okay.
I would say essentially most of our right-of-ways, especially on the north end where people have done that, are massive surfaces that won't allow penetration and they are in the easement. You know, so I think we have to be really careful too about a permitting process for people being able to do what they want in that 6 or 8 foot easement where they're creating parking. Because when they're removing the grass or the natural surface, we're creating a massive line the whole street long. So what I'm trying to make the point is we're focused here about maybe somebody's 8 by 10 foot patio, but we've got a huge problem on the streets where this crushed stone application is, where people want to make, you know, driveway or parking spaces.
Oh, okay. Okay, that makes sense. So maybe as a suggestion to move this forward, if you can share with this group what you were just referring to that has some of that definition in it, or at least description in it. And then if we can find a way to add this concept of not just the materials, but how they're being installed. And maybe that's a good idea. Dave, I know you've got to make an exit. Do you have other thoughts on this that you want to share, or kind of reaction to the conversation we just had?
I guess I just want to, from the scope of what we set out to do, we were just trying to address the question of pervious versus impervious. So I'm wondering if just removing that section is suitable. I mean, it has to go to planning and zoning anyway. So that would be my only comment, as opposed to spending more time trying to get the whole definition of it out. I mean, this was something we tried to do for code enforcement because it would help them in terms of what's able to be enforced. So.
Yeah, I mean, you mean specifically around that concept of pervious, impervious?
Yeah, pervious, that's what we tried to set out, as opposed to speaking to construction standards for what is, impervious materials, because that's what we're kind of getting to here. So I don't disagree with what Marcia's trying to get to. Is this the time and place for it? That's all. And I kind of would say, like, Dawn, do you have any feedback? I mean, is it a problem for you now about how people are constructing things that you're having to, manage?
Well, when folks come to me and we talk about what kind of patio or sidewalk or whatever, I do bring up the fact that it needs to be pervious, and they have to use the lasagna layers of having the water be able to perk through. I do come up and tell them crush and run is not allowed because it does turn to concrete. Now, there are some when water comes on it. So I'm sorry, just had the phone I had to answer. So when I talk to folks, I tell them crush and run is out. You cannot use that. There is a debate among engineers. Some say, yes, crush and run turns right to concrete, and others say, no, it doesn't. So I don't allow it, but I am not able to enforce it in the respect that I do not have the luxury of watching the installation from an inspector point of view to be able to see the various layers. So it's really more or less an honor system that folks are doing a pervious surface so the water perks through. But I do have the luxury of being able to say, well, here's a particular diagram through the Institute of Pervious Pavers that helps to show what kinds of stone that they need to do and use within their installation. And I assume most folks do it, but I can't bet my life on it.
Okay.
I think actually, just to enforce what Dawn's saying, I think it is kind of critical because I don't think our code gives her the authority to enforce it because we don't have anything in our code that actually says this is the application you must use. So I think what she's saying is there is urgency because she can say that's what the town recommends, or we can't even say requires because the code doesn't actually require it.
It's not specific with the actual details. We're more or less relying on some within the industry that says this would make a pervious surface, this would not, and so forth. So yes, Marcia, you're right.
Okay.
I mean, I think, so I do think because we've been through this and I do think this section is urgency because in the next year, every year we see building. And, it's pretty critical if we're going to look at this with our surfaces that it gets addressed quickly and with a lot more specificity. And I also want to add that we should have Fred or Dawn look at one of the things that this said in this interview was actually it's a permeable surface, which means capable of passing something, in this case, water.
You mean permeable versus pervious?
Yes.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, we agree. So, okay.
So
just to be specific about what I'm hearing though, because I think what you're recommending with an underline around the concept of urgency is that we add something to this that is specific around installation instructions and what's okay and what's recommended and what you should do and what you should not do. Is that the piece that's missing that you're saying we should include?
Are you asking Dawn or?
I think I'm asking you, but
Oh, yeah, no, I think that the code falls so short of her being able to enforce the application, the installation, the surfaces. And I think we have more construction we've seen in the past year or two and to continue for the next 2 years. So I do think when she says it needs urgency, it's probably one section of the code that does.
Okay, so I think we're clear on that. You have a document that you're going to forward to the rest of us. We've got the suggested additions from Dave, and then I think we just said we're probably going to take out one of those phrases. And so let's take a look at what you send out.
Mhm.
I agree that we got to at some point come to some understanding of pervious versus permeable and whether one of those is more correct to use than the other in certain circumstances. So we'll add that to the list. Does anybody, I don't know if we still have Dave, because I know we're losing him, but anybody else have anything on this topic that you want to mention before we move on to the next topic?
So I guess I'll just say this, Marcia, if you want to send it to all of us, and then maybe we can come up with a paragraph to put in there, I guess, and we'll just leave it there. And we can bring it back next time.
Yep.
Okay.
I have a question. Don, what's the Sussex County code for this issue with the coastal towns and just in general? And why does our code match their code? And I don't really understand where we're reinventing the wheel and how we're making sure that, or if we are, and how we're making sure that our code is up to the standards, whether it's the International Business Code for construction or the best practices people are using to make sure that the water does flow through. I mean, there's a lot of work that's been done on this. So I don't understand why we're coming up with language that we're really not qualified, and we're not just using somebody that is qualified to write these sections because we're all amateurs. I'm very confused by that. But I guess the first question is, Dawn, where does Sussex come down on this issue?
I actually have not compared with Sussex County having to say on something that's either pervious or impervious. I'd have to look into that. However, I do know that when Sussex County, I guess, makes any ruling, if anything is within a municipality's limits, they stand off of it. It's not something that they get involved in. They recognize each municipality as the sovereign rulership of that particular area. So to answer your question, I don't know what Sussex County does for any of its county installations, such as an oak orchard or.
So we
somewhere
don't
that
have to,
doesn't-
we can put whatever we want, and we shouldn't assume that Sussex code is something that we should look forward to for guidance.
Well, it could very well be that they may have an idea or two in wording that might get across the principle and so forth. Other municipalities could also have the wording when it comes to pervious, impervious, patios, sidewalks. What do they allow or not allow? That I don't know. I've not investigated.
I can do that research just to see what the other codes are. Just look through like Rehoboth, Bethany, some of the others, just to see what comes up.
Okay. Okay, anything else on that topic? Thanks, Dave. You can probably.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Dave.
Perfect.
All right.
All right, next, Elaine, I know you and Jimmy were looking at sign. You're waving me off. Go ahead, Elaine. It looked like you were trying to say
I'm
something.
sorry, I've done nothing. I had the eye surgery and then I had eye surgery again, and I'm so behind with my other stuff that I've done absolutely nothing. So that's my offer. That's what I have to offer, nothing.
No worries. Okay.
I haven't done much more because work and trying to read through the ordinances just, it numbs my mind. Seriously. So,
Okay.
I
Got it.
mean, we're on Jimmy's, and I don't know if I'm particularly in a sour mood, but I don't really understand why we're not having somebody like Dave Naples paying someone professionally to go through the code, who knows the code. And I know it's about money, but as we know, that code has cost us money in lawsuits and future lawsuits. So it seems that to have that person working with us would be very helpful. And he knows the code in the state backwards and forwards. I mean, that's his specialty. So that's why I'm a little bit unenthusiastic as well, just feeling like I'm unqualified to participate in this group. And that's probably why it's, when Jimmy says it's numbing, that's because it's not something that is natural.
not my expertise.
It's not my expertise.
Okay.
But I'm smart enough to know what a good lawyer is. And I'm smart enough to know when you're working with an expert, if the person knows what they're talking about. I'm smart enough we're all clever enough to be able to look at it that way. But I think that a lot of the code mistakes, and somebody that would really know, I mean, both Gary and Marcia, Marcia's got a lot of properties here, and Gary, you're on the town commissioner, isn't a lot of the mistake stuff that other committees have not written as well. And so now we're just going over the things that they've written, and we're also not experts. I mean, Marcia, you're more of an expert because you have so many properties, and Gary, you're somewhat of an expert because you've been dealing with this stuff all these years. So I just have thought that there should be a budget for this, and that budget should be used to get someone in to help orchestrate this with us. And then we can be more helpful.
I
Okay.
agree.
So, okay. So Gary, I think this has come up once before. I don't know if we have thoughts on the committee's ability to request a budget and go hire an expert. I guess, Elaine, so that I'm clear on your suggestion is that this committee should continue its work, but with the assistance of somebody we pay who's an expert in this particular field?
If it really, I think I guess you could have somebody like Naples, if that's the person you want it to get, or somebody that has a lot of Delaware experience, and then a lot of experience in other states as well, could actually go through it, rewrite it, present it to the town commissioners for them to look over and make the changes, or to agree or not to agree, and send it to planning and zoning. Who the people in planning and zoning, I don't know, does it go, Gary, first to planning and zoning and then to you all? Or it could go to you all and then back to planning and zoning?
Well, if it's a zoning issue, it goes commissioners and they refer it to planning and zoning, and it comes back again. And there are public hearings that get held as part of the process as well. There's you can certainly make the recommendation, the kind of recommendation you're suggesting. And there are a couple of ways to think about it. I think the way that we've been thinking about it is that we know there are a lot of problems in the code. I mean, you're having trouble reading through the section of the code that deals with what you can do with signs, what kinds of signs are allowed. One way to think about that is just to step back and say, well, what do we want the code to say? What do we want to be able to do with respect to signs? And then we can write a code, then we can write a section of code that enables that and use that and come up with a proposal. Now you could have an attorney do that. Someone on the committee could draft that.
Well, I think, Gary, I'm actually working with Dave Nichols on another issue in Dewey on state code issues about parking and things. And the guy is incredibly knowledgeable, and it's really good back and forth. But I could say to him, I think it should be the sign should be blinking this way, and he can cite to you whether or not that's a good idea, why it's not a good idea, what the state code is, just all of the things that to him it's second nature, instead of us kind of saying, I think it should say this, because obviously the sign doesn't seem like it's complex, and it's not that complex, but I think that we've acted in that way and then not had a code with a lot of holes in it. To me, to take care of this and do it swiftly, you can still take the chapters that you laid out and we can go by them. We can, go through them, and he would be in the meetings and show the changes and explain the changes to us. People can question his changes. I'm just thinking on the top of my head, and it would go a lot quicker. We actually did that didn't we do that for the charter? We brought somebody in, I thought. Oh, it was probably David. David did all that. But this would be an expert. And I think he's about $90 an hour. So you can go for the things that are the actual tough ones. And the chapters that really need to be addressed that they've run into a lot. And you've already addressed a lot of those. And then I think that I feel more comfortable sitting on the committee because I'd be doing it. That's how I personally feel about it.
Well, I mean, as we're currently structured, we don't have a defined budget for the committee. There's probably some money available. Is there enough money to hire a consultant to go through, either section by section or go through the entire code? I'm not sure whether or not there will be, support for doing that. I'm not sure. But again, this is a committee that you guys, you have a specific charge. I mean, maybe we go back to the specific charge to the committee and decide, have some more discussions about what the best way to achieve what the committee's been charged with doing. And what you're saying right now is that it's not working, but
it might be working for you all. I'm only speaking for how I would play this out.
No, I understand. That's why I'm saying, among the committee members, you should discuss this and decide what you think the right approach is. I mean, I still think that there's a lot that a citizens committee can do with respect to the town code. I mean, ultimately, you want a town code that's understandable, not just to attorneys, but to the constituents who are faced with, abiding by and faced with, if they have a construction project, having a town code that makes some sense to them that they can interpret as well. But again, it's something that you guys can discuss. I think there's a lot that can be done here. It does take some hard work and a lot of thoughts for some of these sections. Some of these things there's some things in the code that are fairly easy to fix, some wording changes, some inconsistencies that don't make a lot of sense. But maybe you've run across a particular section that's difficult and really does need some outside help. And maybe the way to do that is just to go get some outside help for that section. And I'm not trying to direct your work here, but I want you guys to discuss it and decide what you think the best way to approach this is.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Gary. I think from my perspective, I think there's value that we can add by going through and doing what we just did with the last section, which might seem like a slog, but it's not so much about whether we're experts in code writing as it is whether the people who live and work and own businesses in the town can look at that code and have it make sense to them. And we just had 20 minutes of conversation about whether we understood permeable versus pervious, and in the real life examples that Marcia was giving about where that particular section has impacted people who are trying to build stuff in the town. So from my standpoint, all that is, can lead to value that a group of people who are sitting on this committee can add. And then in the end, yeah, we're going to have to show it to lawyers to make sure that that makes sense, that it doesn't contravene some part of the code elsewhere. But I guess I'd vote for doing that, I think, rather than punting it to the committee's work solely to
I'm not going to try to convince you. I guess I'm just everybody else. I just am convinced after 13 years in this town that making a code that is like a user-friendly guide is not really what a code's all about. And the language that people, when they're in the business, impervious, and they understand that stuff, but it has to be written as it should be written, as they're used to seeing it. And to do that, sometimes that's somebody who does that all the time. They can write that language that may seem hard for you to understand, but the guy who's reading it, because the charter that we have right now was, I don't know who it was written by. Do you know who it was written by? Was it written by a graduate student at the time? Was that one of the Delaware people that wrote it? Was it who wrote the code? You know, Gary?
I don't know. I don't know. It
So-
predates my involvement.
So, yeah, that's my lack of enthusiasm to see this stuff go many, many times over and over and over again. When, like, for instance, if Dawn's on the line, that how many times, like the typing errors and stuff, why do you need a committee to do that? It should be just, if you're going a certain amount of pages and you see those, Dawn puts them in, the town brings them up to town meeting or takes them to the planning and zoning, and you fix them. So, but the bigger question is a readable, for me, it's not just about readability, it's more about the legal aspect of not constantly having things built in town that we later, because of things, I mean, Marcia is a case in point, the whole lawsuit that you went through. And it was whether or not the code was clear or wasn't clear, and it cost the town a lot of money. That's why I think we're here, as well as making sure that the code is living up to the best international, international business code, which is the standard for all building. And I don't think us making it readable for a contractor or business person is really, there's sometimes that they have to do their due diligence and know what they're supposed to be doing or hire someone to do it. So that's all I'm going to say. And then I'll be listening to you all, but I'm turning my camera off because I got to run and get something.
Marcia or Jimmy or both?
Well, I tend to agree when it comes to the code. I think the charter, the portion of our committee, the last year and a half or 2 years was focused on the charter, which is definitely, it is a legal document, but not in the sense that every building project goes on in this town defaults to the code. It doesn't default to the charter. The charter is, talks about how we govern the town. And so I don't know who wrote the original code. I think I had talked to Gary about this early on, that, I had a good friend in town who wanted to volunteer to help. She was a lawyer in charge of a municipal practice in Baltimore. Unfortunately, last month she passed away. And, we lost a really great person in town and a really good resource for this committee. But one of her comments over the years, as we've worked together just as friends on the code, was she thought the Dewey Code was the worst code she had ever read. That it was sloppy and inconsistent, and she has read town codes all her life because she defends municipalities. And so I think if we're going to take time to do this, I honestly think that we need a nice budget. We got to get it right. It's a code we default to hundreds of times a day, every day when building is going on. And, you know, Delaware, as codes are written, if the code is unclear or there's two reasonable ways to interpret the code, you know, it always defaults to the property owner. Legally, always defaults to the property owner. So it is about making sure the code doesn't have inconsistencies or two reasonable definitions, depending on who reads it. But I do think this challenge is so much bigger than the charter challenge because it's a completely different animal. And so when I look at Dewey's budget and the amount of transfer tax we've received in the last 2 years and the excessive amount of transfer tax we're receiving for the next several years, I really believe we should have $50,000 or $100,000 to use as resources for this rewrite in professional fees. We've got property values that have tripled in the last year and a half. We've got houses that we're selling in the North End on land lease for $600,000 a year ago that are now $1.5 million. We've got fee simples that we're selling for $1 million that are now $3 million. And we are getting a huge chunk of revenue on that. I can't think of a better place to put it than with this committee and let us do this work. But I am in support of Elaine's, and you're right, I've been in this code for 20 years and I probably know more sections than anyone, and it is daunting. You know, it's a challenge, even the sections I've gone through. And the last time we met, I said, I can't even wrap my arms around the depth that I have to go through this without some professional guidance. So I think there are sections, like Barry said, that are much more challenging, that will require a lot of assistance. I think there are some that won't, but I don't think it's any comparison to what we did with the charter committee. So.
Okay. Jimmy, how about you?
I agree with Elaine and Marcia on both points, all the points. I mean, I can read through the code, but trying to make some of it make sense, it's just try and wonder why people wrote it down. Like one of the things on signs was, it's not permitted for a sign to change more than 4 times a day. I don't understand why that's in there. I don't understand what it means, because everybody has a digital sign. Mine changes 4 times every 3 minutes. So I don't understand why some of the stuff is in there. And I do think somebody with a better background, I mean, I can certainly sit through and read and do work, but I don't want to do it if it's for none. That's all.
Can I just say, you just turned yourself in for violating the code.
I know. I mean, I mean, but anybody, I mean, also somewhere in the code, it says you can't have, somewhere in the code, it says you can't have the little searchlights, you know, that go like this. And I see them all the time. So, I mean, but it doesn't hurt anybody. It's just, I don't know why it would be written. It should just, I could go through and just X out half of it, because none of it just doesn't make any reasonable, has no reasonable reason to be in there.
And can I add to your whole perspective on that? Because I have several pools at my properties. And one of the other totally unreasonable things in this section was pulled obviously from a public pool code that you had to have a 3-foot walkway all around the pool. People have not been building pools with walkways all the way around the pool for a decade.
Right.
They
I mean,
have a waterfall.
what about Infinity Edge? You know, I agree. Yes.
You know?
Okay, so got it. Yep, agreed. All right, so it sounds like there's consensus that
Yeah.
you would benefit.
And
from-
guys, I have an hour. I have got and another thing I have to get to. If you don't mind, I'm meeting dates for next time. Just let me know. I have sent the document already.
Okay.
So you all have a copy of it, and you know, feel free to call me, or I also have the contact information of the man I interviewed. And
Okay.
I think you'll see on that, he was open to calls too.
Okay, thanks.
All
Marcia.
right, thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Marcia.
Bye.
Okay, Gary, so if if the committee wanted to make a request that we be allocated a budget and then we use the budget to hire somebody who's got some expertise in code writing to help us along the path, what's the process to do that?
Since it's not on your agenda for tonight, I think it would probably not be appropriate for you to try to draft something,
Yeah.
on the fly. And so I think probably come back at the next meeting, have someone, either you or someone else, draft some sort of a proposal that you can then submit to the commissioners.
Okay,
And, provide some reasoning for it if you want. But I think that's probably the right thing to do. It would not be appropriate to vote on it tonight since it's not on the agenda.
yeah, agreed.
I mean, I'll go back and say, I mean, it's important that it gets done. And I've been here for 13 years and I think we've tried to cover this and take care of it for the last 8 or 9 years.
Mm,
And until you get somebody with expertise to do it, we can sit here and do it. And 2 years later, somebody's going to say, this doesn't make any sense. Why is this here? So I think it needs to be done professionally with our help, but we need some sort of guidance.
Okay,
And that's what we did with the charter. So
yep. So I think we have alignment on that. So I agree. I'll go draft something and we'll add it as an agenda for the next meeting. Okay.
I think that it will be work that we can be proud of if we do have assistance, and it will certainly go a lot quicker. And it doesn't all have to be budgeted in 2022 because it's already, we can do so many sections and then it can be the next year's budget. So,
Okay. Yep, makes sense. So I think that actually kind of that conversation just took us through agenda item 2 when we think about what the next areas of focus might be. Maybe that will be our immediate area of focus. Okay. I'm actually interested in the sign thing, by the way, if anybody wants to talk about the sign language before we get to this part about having having an expert come in and help us. I haven't been through that sign language, but I'm pretty interested in.
Jimmy, do you want to talk about it?
No, I mean, you don't have to talk about it right now. I'm happy to go catch up on it offline and come back as we make progress.
What Jimmy was talking about, just to give you a little brief on that, and Dawn is still on the line, she could easily brief you on it, is that it was, at one time, it was about the distraction to Route 1, and that going on and off, and it was a lot, light was different, the signs were different that's really old language. Dawn, you and I talked about this quite a bit.
Uh-huh.
Do you have anything to add about some of the sign stuff, just since we already did some of that work?
Well, actually, that code is one of the worst codes to try to decipher when you're trying to work with an applicant. It's just very difficult to calculate and so forth. But anyway, yes, the digital sign changing 4 times a day max. We don't have the signs that do that. Yes, they do change sometimes 4 times, almost a minute, or while you're sitting at the light. They change so frequently. So that does not match the literal interpretation of the code. So there have been those who have wanted digital signs. And when I read that portion of the code with them, they've backed off. Well, I can't do that. I need to have these signs appropriate to attract customers to my business, and I want to display a lot more information that perhaps they would like to know. So the sign code is very difficult to decipher and to enforce with you can't allow some and not others.
But isn't it also because it was Route 1 and in the hazard of all of the distracting signs? It was,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes, Del Dot also does talk about how they do not allow distractions toward motorists with certain signs and so forth. So I don't know if Del Dot's influence has been with our code on digital signs or not. I don't know.
Some of the language back there is meant for, I guess, back in the 70s and 80s, there's little white boards that had like the white lights that went all the way around them. And they would just sit there and flash all day long. And I think that's part of what the flashing part and the distraction of people driving. And also, nobody wants it to look like Las Vegas through the middle of Dewey. I mean, I understand there's stuff in there for reasons, it's just not clear. And I agree with Dawn, it's just not clear.
It is not, and it's very difficult to be impartial and fair toward all folks.
Don, do you have an opinion on us getting how you would like to see? Would you like there to be a budget to hire someone professionally? Would that be easier for you than dealing just with a very sincere volunteer wanting to work on this?
You spoke about Dave Naples. I highly regard that gentleman. He is a master code official with the International Code Council, which means he has over 25 certifications when it comes to building and construction. He has helped me tremendously when it has come down to various projects locally that I had a question on, and because I am a code official and he is well, he has helped me tremendously at no charge to the town. So with his expertise, when he has given me the appropriate codes to look at, and I was not aware of that information, he has helped me tremendously. So with him, I have deep regard for him. Now, whether he has the attorney language, or, I don't know any of that detail, but he does know his stuff, so to speak. What I'm interested.
I was just going to say, the sign is a really classic example of the interest of the business owner and what you might like to have and what the codes are and the best codes are. And then together with like a committee, you could hear what he had to say. And he's not making the law. He's doing the codes that would be what we are supposed to follow or the best practices. But at least it would be something that when it was being drafted, the citizen committee, because you two are businessmen, would be able to weigh in on that and have the best language.
Okay, I think we're agreed.
I'm sorry, I stepped on you, Dawn.
Sorry, no, fine.
No, I think, okay, yeah, I think that's good. I think we have consensus on that, and that's going to turn into a recommendation. And so I'll take a stab at drafting that, and then we'll come back and that'll be perhaps agenda item number 1 at our next meeting. Good. Anything else before we move into any public comments? All right, Kate, do we have anybody waiting to make a public comment?
You do not.
Fantastic.
Imagine that.
Okay.
So it's so interesting. It's a hot topic, I guess.
Yeah, maybe we can rally some folks who want to come make some comments. We'll see. All right, I think we've had a lot of comments from each other, but let's go around one last time. Elaine or Jimmy, any final comments before we talk about the next meeting date?
I don't have any additional.
All right, Gary, any final comments from you?
Nothing for me, no.
All right, guys, how is either June 20th or June 27th? Both of those are Mondays, 6 p.m. Either one of those work, or one better than the other for you guys?
Either fine for me.
Jimmy,
Fine.
Either are fine with me too. I mean, probably earlier, and the earlier is probably better because it's before 4th of July week. So
yeah, for sure.
20th would be better for me.
All right, so we'll float that to everybody else. Fantastic. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. I think with that, can we have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Thanks.
I second it.
All right, thanks so much, guys. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.